Join your host, Maddie Roche, as she brings you into a community of fee-only financial advisors who are successfully building profitable businesses that serve the next generation of clients. Learn from innovative advisors whose unique stories will inspire you to dream big and take action on your goals. Are you ready to live your best life and help your clients live theirs? Then you're in the right place.
Hello, and welcome to episode 317 of XYPN Radio. I'm excited to welcome Tom Lowe, XYPN member and founder of Vested Financial Planning, on the show today. As his firm name alludes to, Tom works with Silicon Valley tech professionals and has a particular focus on helping clients through liquidity events at their company. Tom shares today that he too once went through a liquidity event at a tech startup and found it to be such a compelling experience that it became one of his motivations to change his career. As Tom discusses today, a liquidity event at a tech startup is a great opportunity for sophisticated and technical planning from a third party like himself to provide unbiased perspective to those who are emotionally invested in the process. I enjoyed this conversation a lot as Tom dove into how he serves clients so effectively by outsourcing major components of his business, from asset management to bookkeeping. He also discusses the softer side of being a business owner too, like what it means to have control of your destiny, complete control of your business, and of course, flexibility. If you're interested in working with this niche or gaining any of what I just mentioned, then this show is for you. An event made just for fee-only advisors? Yep, you heard that right. It's XYPN Live. And with over 45 content sessions, 3 keynotes, a one-of-a-kind exhibit hall day, and networking opportunities galore, it's the game-changing event you've been looking for. Join us in November, in person or virtually, and leave with knowledge, new connections, and a whole lot of inspiration to accelerate your progress and smash your goals, no matter where you are in your advisor journey. Visit xypnlive.com for full details and to grab your pass. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN radio listeners. It's a community of advisors we've all been looking for. That's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Hello, Tom. Welcome to XYPN Radio. How are you?
I'm good, Maddie. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. Why don't you get the listeners introduced to Tom Lowe?
Sure. So I'm Tom Lowe. And I am a career changer. So I worked in Silicon Valley for about 20 years before I started my firm. And the firm I started is Vested Financial Planning. And I started just over 3 years ago. And it's here in San Carlos, California, which is it's about 25 miles south of San Francisco. And it is really in the heart of Silicon Valley. And so given my background, given where I am located, it's probably no surprise, but my niche is Gen X, Gen Y, Silicon Valley tech professionals with equity.
Oh, love it.
So I'm working with a lot of clients who work at private companies or newly public companies with a lot of equity. And then also a number of clients who are in big tech. So bigger companies like Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, Netflix.
Great. And just to give the listeners a little taste of kind of what you've built, how many clients are you serving? You said you've been around for 3 years.
Yeah. So let's see. So I started from scratch. And so now we have 48 client households that we're serving. And that is we're doing ongoing financial planning for everybody. That's all relationships. And almost all of those I'm also doing investment management.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, let's go back in time. You mentioned you're a career changer. I absolutely love this industry so much because it is a great one for career changers. Why don't you let the listeners know kind of what you were working on and what your experience was prior to opening up your own financial planning firm?
Sure. So it's a long and winding journey. But so back in college, I was a liberal arts major. So really nothing at all to do with financial planning. And then my first job out of college was in marketing. I went back, I got my MBA, and then I came out and I started working in Silicon Valley. And so that was in various marketing and product management roles. I worked at some startups. I worked at bigger companies like eBay, Yahoo into it. And there was, I guess, an important experience for me was I worked here in the late 90s during the dot-com bubble, and I worked at a dot-com. And as an employee, I got a bunch of incentive stock options, a bunch of ISOs. And for those who were around, that company went public. So we had our IPO. The stock was worth a lot. Everybody was having a great old time. And then what happened was the dot-com bubble burst. My stock actually the company shut down. My stock went to zero. And I realized, I actually owe some taxes on all these ISOs that are worth nothing. And I said, wow, I better educate myself about how these things work. And so I realized I didn't really understand how they worked. I also talked to a bunch of my colleagues and realized most of those people didn't know how they worked. And so that really started me down the path, because what I did is said, okay, I want to educate myself. I don't want this to happen again. And equity comp is just a critical part of your compensation here in Silicon Valley. So I ended up taking a class, which turned out to be the first class in the CFP curriculum.
Wow.
Right. And so I said, and I loved it. And I had always had an interest in personal finance for a lot of my life. I read a bunch of books. For myself and my wife, that was my thing, my hobby. But I took the class and I loved it, and realized, ended up taking more classes, and then realized, I can do this for a living. And so ended up talking to other financial planners to get a better understanding of how it worked. I took the exam and then realized, hey, if I want to do this, I want to make sure I make a good decision around that. And as specifically, I had a mortgage and 2 kids. And so I wanted to make sure I was doing it right. So I ended up working part-time for a fee-only firm out of San Jose for a few years. And that was a way to test into, hey, do I really want to do this? Right. Because I was making good money in Silicon Valley. I was going to have to take a big pay cut to make a move. And so I said, I want to make sure. So I did that for a few years on the side while I kept my full-time job in tech. And I loved it. I just got a ton of personal satisfaction from working with clients, right? Helping to do the things that are important to them, like buying a home, saving for college, retiring, all of those things. And so that is what got me to the point of, okay, I want to do this thing. And then the other piece of that is that as a career changer, one of the biggest issues I was trying to figure out is, how do I address that income gap? Because I knew I was going to take a big pay cut. And so I ended up, the way I decided to do that was, I said, well, maybe if I get a full-time job with a salary at a bigger firm, that'll let me cross that gap. And so I ended up working for a big fee-only RA out of San Francisco for a few years with a salary. And that got me closer to what I wanted to do.
I love that. And I really appreciate your willingness to test something before you dive into it. I think a lot of advisors kind of need that reminder, of folks who want to go and build their own businesses, that it's okay to go test the water, see if you really like the work. What was that like in terms of, did you have to disclose anything with the RIA that you were working at part-time? Did you have to tell the Silicon Valley team that you were with that you were doing part-time work? What was the part-time work like in logistics?
So with my tech employer, since I was really doing it on the side, as in evenings and weekends, I did not, we didn't talk about it at work. And then on the RA side, I had to be, I had to go through whatever, I had to take my Series 65, et cetera. I was on the ADV. So all of that they were clear that I was doing this on the side also.
Great.
And the relationship was more, they had some clients that they probably wouldn't normally take. that they sent over to me. And then it was mostly me trying to find clients on my own. And I think that was part of the part of what I realized also is it was actually pretty tough. So I had calculated if I did it for a few years, if I had gone at that rate, I probably would have taken me, I don't know, 150 years to get to a good client base.
And when you went full time with the RIA, was in that salary gap is something a lot of folks think about. Were you able to find a position at a firm as a newbie in a lot of ways that matched a salary that you were making in your environment?
I don't think that's for me coming from Silicon Valley where the salaries you're paid well. I was not expecting, or I don't think that's actually that reasonably possible. So it depends on what you're coming from. So the good news is that my wife has a great job. She works for the federal government, so stable, steady income. So that's something that with saving, et cetera, we were able to figure out. But so the answer is, I think depending on where you're coming from, you may have to take a big pay cut. You just have to be prepared for that reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a theme of all of these interviews over the past few years has been just the importance of intentionality around launching your firm. This isn't something you just do overnight. A lot of folks like you, it's a long-term play.
Yeah. And I think what's helpful is if you think about the way I thought about it, I think this would be important for career changers is, as you had talked about, like testing your way in, crafting experiments. I have a great book I use called Working Identity. And it talks about this idea of crafting experiments where you can, it's for most people thinking about, hey, I'm going to become a financial planner. And that's a totally new career. Theoretically, that's not the way that's helpful for understanding if you want to do that. What's helpful is you start to do things that move you towards that. So for me, it was first taking CFP classes, and I found I really enjoyed those. And then it was, hey, let's try this out on the side. Do I enjoy working with clients? Do I, enjoy finding clients? And all of those were ways for me to test in and say, yeah, I really like this. Because when you do something, you realize, oh, I like this. And you also realize, oh, I don't like doing this. And so I think it's very helpful for the process of, especially if you're making the career changes. If you can just make the leap, but this is a way of, if, for example, you're going to take a big pay cut, then it's worth testing into it.
Yeah, great advice. And this is kind of in line of the discussion of whether you liked being a financial planner. I think a lot of our XYPN advisors and folks who want to do this also have to question, am I ready to be an entrepreneur? And what kind of tests or thinking did you do around that component? Because running your own business isn't something that is super easy, quite frankly. And how did you weigh that in your mind?
Well, let's see. The way it came about is I had been thinking about that for a while, even when I was testing it, doing my own thing. And then kind of what got me, and I don't know that I tested my way into it, but I did. So I worked for the big planning firm for a few years, and I know, okay, I really enjoy this work. I love working with clients. I know I can do it. And the thing that really got me over the hump, there were a couple of things. One is I have a great friend and former colleague, Jane Yu. So she was actually my cube mate at the firm I worked at before. And she left about a year before I did and started her own firm with XYPN. And so I saw her experience, and she was having a great time and doing very well. And so that really inspired me. I'm like, Jane's doing it, I should do it. And then yes, exactly. The other thing that happened was just a life situation, which is I turned 50 and I realized, if this is something I want to do, I really need to do it now, or I'm just not going to get to it. And so that, and then the other critical piece was, I had I have a supportive wife, Caitlin, she both in financially were able to support me, but also just she supported the idea of, hey, you want to go do this thing, you go do it. And so I think I think you guys have talked about it a bunch. If you don't have a spouse who is on board, then it makes it much, much harder to do. So all of those things combined got me over the hump. And I said, yeah, I want to go do this thing.
Beautiful. I'm interested, Tom. Currently, you're running your business in year 3 and you're totally solo still. And that's been an intentional choice of yours. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the firm you've built and why you've remained and how you've remained solo?
Sure. So when I started this, that was my thought, is I will likely do this solo. And then I would say about a year ago, what I was seeing was there's a ton of need for help. Like there are a lot of people who need the help. And so I realized, I can really build a firm if I want to do that. And so actually what I did is I went out, thought about it, and then I started working with a business coach. So Elizabeth Jaton, I think many other people work with her. So explicitly around that idea of, okay, should I stay solo or should I try to build this thing out? And so we talked that through. And what she kind of reminded me, what was interesting, was she said, you know what? It's the same kind of thing. Like you can think about it in theory, you want to build a firm or not, but really the right way to do it is once you just test your way in. Like let's get into reality, which is you start to hire somebody. You can hire somebody part-time. If you enjoy that, you hire somebody full-time, and then you can see if it makes sense, if it evolves into a firm. So at this point, I'm solo. I have a virtual paraplanner I'm working with. So so the way I'm thinking about it right now is testing into it. So it is still an open question, but right now at this point, I'm looking at doing solo, but yeah, that's an open question.
Yeah.
Still
cool.
trying to figure that one out.
I'm interested. Have you outsourced components of your business outside of the VA?
Yeah, I've tried to outsource as much as I can. And so when I started, I immediately started working with a TAMP. So I work with First Descent.
Got it.
And that's been a huge help for me. All of the investment management piece is mostly off my plate. And then I also very early on started outsourcing my bookkeeping to, XYPN counters. And that was a matter of me trying to do it for, 6 to 9 months, realizing I was never going to do it, and then hiring them. And so that's been great. And then compliance, I also have outsourced. So I, worked with compliance consultants at XY, and then continue to do that. And so really anything that is not working directly with the clients, I'm trying to outsource. Just again, because I am solo, I can there's only so much time in the day.
Yeah. I know the question of outsourcing really does come down to time and your ability to really serve the clients you want to serve and in the way that you want to serve them. And it sounds like, Tom, just through our conversations, that you really have a high touch point relationship with your clients and therefore time is of the essence for you. And outsourcing does provide you some extra hours of the week. Can you talk a bit about what that relationship is that you have with your clients?
Sure. So it's, my firm very much is financial planning centric. So that's where the focus of the business is. And that's the focus of the relationship. So a typical relationship is we'll start with a 3-meeting onboarding process. So it starts with the first meeting is discovery. So we talk about goals, values, and at the end we talk about, hey, how are we going to get the data, but it really is all focused on the discovery process. And I use Right Capital. So we just send it out. They put all their info in.
Right.
Second meeting, these are typically 90-minute meetings. Second meeting is a financial planning meeting. And so in that meeting, we will talk about the plan, their initial plan results. Okay, here are the things you want to do. Here's how things are looking. You're tracking towards it. Or if not, what kind of trade-offs do you need to make? And then for many of my clients, they're mostly 30s, 40s, couples, either young kids or think about having kids, potentially buying a house or have a house. And so we talk about the things that are most critical, such as if they have kids, life insurance, estate planning, education planning. So that's what the second meeting is focused on. We go away. The clients take a risk tolerance questionnaire. The third meeting is a 90-minute meeting. And there we talk about what are your goals, time horizon. We have your plan so we understand what kind of return we need, what's your risk tolerance, and then we decide on investment strategy. And, I believe markets are generally efficient, so primarily passive. I do some DFA, and they decide, okay, here's how we're going to execute, and then we go execute. And so that typically takes 2 to 3 months to onboard. And then, the other piece of that is typically almost all my clients have a bunch of equity. So we have to figure out what to do with the equity as part of that conversation. And so it's very common for clients to come in with, 50, 80, 90, 95% of their net worth in a single company stock. That's very typical for the clients I'm working with. And so we talk about, okay, here's your equity. Here's how concentrated you are. Let's figure out a selling plan. How are we going to diversify this so that it's, you're not so highly concentrated? And so that is also part of that conversation typically. And often they are facing and the reason they're reaching out to me is because they have a liquidity event. So, they're going to have an IPO in a month. So let's figure out what to do before the IPO happens. So that's very common. That's often the trigger. That's why they're reaching out to me, is they got all this equity, they got to figure out what to do with it. And so that is typically part of that planning. And we figure out, we have all this equity, how are we going to diversify? And then how are we going to use that to reach your goals, which are part of your overall plan? So then once they're onboarded, let's say that's 2 to 3 months, then we start to meet typically 2 to 3 times a year. And in those conversations, we're checking, how are you tracking towards your plan? How are the investments doing? And then we'll usually go deeper into some specific planning area. So it could be, depending on the timing, tax planning, open enrollment, property and casualty insurance, whatever is relevant for them. And usually almost in every case, we'll also cover equity because they have, that's an ongoing problem or issue they got to solve. They got, equity vesting every month or every quarter. So we have to figure out what to do with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fascinated in this niche, and given your experience having had a lot of equity and then it falling to zero, what kind of coaching do you do for your clients around that diversification of their portfolio?
Well, I have to tell you, it is an ongoing issue that I'm trying to that I face because, as I said, most people come in, and in most cases, and I faced this when I was an employee. If you're an employee at a company, you tend to be a big believer in that company, or otherwise you wouldn't be there. So you're there, and you're hearing all the great news about the company, and so you are like, I want to keep this forever, And so it's a big issue trying to help clients get comfortable with diversifying. And so part of that is the concentration conversation is to help them understand, okay, here's the risks that's involved if you have 95% of your assets in a single company stock. And the classic example I show them is I'll just show them a stock chart of Enron. So I don't know if you remember Enron, right? Yeah. But the Enron chart is, it was a high-flying company for years. Stock was $90 a share. Bad news came out. Within months, it was nothing, right? And so that's kind of the worst case scenario, what can happen. I don't expect it'll happen with the company, but it is possible. And so helping them understand the risk in that, giving them an example, that then helps them understand, okay, that's why I should think about diversifying. And then the next part is helping them have a framework for making the decision around selling. So I give them some very clear ways. Here are some ways to do that. So for example, common ways are you sell everything immediately. Most clients don't want to do that. They can't get comfortable with that. So then we have a couple other ways, which is you could sell, for example, sell a certain percent over time. So you sell 25% a quarter over the next 4 quarters. Okay. Or you can say, hey, we can sell more when it's higher, less when it's lower. So you sell price targets and you say, hey, above a certain price, you'll sell this much. In the middle, you sell this much. At a lower price, you'll sell less. Okay. And those, by giving them a way to think about it, I think it's helpful for them to say, oh, okay, here are ways I can diversify to get them comfortable with that. And so in most cases, that's very helpful.
What would you have done with advice like that when you were when
I was an employee? I think it would have been helpful to have what I'm trying to help the clients to come up with a very clear, simple, rational way of thinking about it. Because what happens is for clients is they see their stock and their stock is going up and down every day, right? So what happens is if you don't think about it and you're able to sell, you go, oh, I think it's going to go up just a little bit more, so I'm not going to sell it now. Or, oh, it just dropped. I know it's going to bounce back up. So your emotions you get deeply emotionally involved in it. And so what the plan does, it helps them come up with a way to minimize the emotion as part of the decision. And so I think if that had happened when I was an employee, I think it would have been helpful because it would have given me a way to think about it. And, when you're an employee at a company, the only thing you're hearing is everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid. So you don't hear any other perspective on it. And so it's very helpful to have some third-party objective perspective on it.
Totally. I love your website, Tom, because you have that great video there where you tell the story in under 3 minutes of what happened to you. How much do you see that really playing into your relationship with clients and in your niche?
Well, I think it's very helpful in terms of connecting to the prospects or clients because they know that I know what they're going through. I've gone through it. And so I think that's very helpful for them. So I think it's a great way of connecting. And the culture in Silicon Valley companies is very specific. There's a way the world works, and I lived in that world for a long time. And so I think the way the cultural norms, the way people talk about things, the language, that's all very helpful for prospects and clients feeling some connection.
Totally. I also see it likely being a huge generator of new clients for you, that once you kind of are in this niche, because they're big companies, once folks work with you, kind of the word spreads a bit about Tom Lowe. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as an example, again, I talked about liquidity events. So I had a new client sign on from Slack, the company Slack that makes the Slack that everybody uses, maybe a month or two before the IPO. And then, she had a great experience. And she had, more importantly, a bunch of other people at the company are saying, hey, what do I do? I got all this equity. And so within a couple of months, I had 4 clients at Slack. So it's all and that is the primary way that people, it is that word of mouth, it's client referrals. And it's happening really, if you think about it, it's happening in a much more compressed way because everybody's going through the same thing and they need the help at the same time. Mm-hmm. And the other interesting part of that is that it's often happening, people word of mouth, people talking, but it also happens people within Slack, within all tech companies, everybody's using Slack. So they usually have a Slack channel that is a stocks channel or a personal finance channel. And so people will say, hey, anybody know anybody who can help me? And so that also has been a great source of referrals. It's not people explicitly saying, it's somebody saying, hey, I work with this guy, he can help you. And then people go on there and they look and they reach out to me because of that.
The technical expertise that's required to coach someone through a liquidation event of their company seems to be huge. And it's a lot more than just the CFP curriculum. I don't even believe they talk about it in the that deeply in the CFP curriculum. That begs the question of how do you consider that when it comes to your pricing? Because you really bring to the table a lived experience, but a technical expertise that maybe the average financial planner doesn't have. Have you tinkered with your pricing to reflect that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have had multiple iterations of my pricing. And let me talk about first the technical piece. And here's what I say to prospects. And here's the reality is that because the values that they're talking about are so large, right? The equity is worth a lot. Every little bit you can optimize. If I can help you save 10%, 20% on your $1 million, that's $100,000, $200,000. It makes a huge difference. So as an example, I've had a client come in this fall, startup about to go public. He was an early employee there. And I said, hey, he said, hey, help me figure out what to do with stock. And I said, great. And I said, oh, I don't know if you know, but this stock may qualify for something called QSBS, Qualified Small Business Stock Tax. And what it means is you can be up to 100% exempt from federal taxes.
Wow.
Very strict criteria, not very common. But we looked at it, figured out it actually did qualify for QSBS. So he's had about $5 million in equity. Because he qualifies for QSBS, he's going to save $1.3 million in taxes on that. And so that's something he wouldn't have realized if he wasn't working with somebody who had the expertise to help him with that.
Wow.
And so when you think about the value, if you have the technical expertise in this area, it's huge, the amount of value you can add. And so part of the way the pricing has evolved is because I've realized, hey, there's a ton of value here for the clients. And so the way my business has evolved, when I started, I offered planning and investment management if you want, but I did do planning only. And that started with for couples, $5,000, for individuals, $3,500.
Wow.
And for, again, this area, Silicon Valley tech professionals, these guys are making good money. So they're probably making, typically, you work at a tech company, you're making $200, $250, couples making, 500. And so that for them is quite reasonable. So that's how it started. And then I would say 9 months or so in, I recognized, hey, I can add a ton of value for clients. And also I was getting, as I said, there was a lot of demand for, a lot of people need help. And so I was getting, as a solo, overwhelmed really. And so I said, well, what should I do? And, having listened to the podcast many times, hey, the only reasonable thing to do, the lever is raise your prices. So I raised my prices and I did that. So I raised prices. Things didn't slow down much, so I raised them a little bit more, so on. So I've been through a number of different price increases, and those have been, some have worked, some haven't, but it's continued to be that model where it's planning only, investment management is an add-on. And then about a year ago, I also what I was seeing happening was that the retention for, a couple of things happened. One is there are clients I was working planning only with, and I would say, we do the plan. I would say, here's how you want to invest. And then what was happening not fairly often is that we would check in and they wouldn't be investing the way we had talked about investing. So they weren't getting invested. So that's, the reason I'm doing this work for you is I want to help you. But if you're not doing what you need to do, I can't help you. And then the other thing I noticed was retention. So the planning only clients retention was quite a bit lower than for AUM. And I've heard this pretty consistently, but what would happen is a client work with them a couple of years, they get their estate planning in place, they have their life insurance done, they have the plan, they know what they're going to do with their equity. And they would say, hey, look, thank you. We're in a great place. But we're done. And so what I found is because people weren't doing the investing that I was, that we had agreed for them to do, and because the retention was lower, about a year ago, I started working with clients and I said, hey, you need to do, I'm going to do both the planning and the investment management. So I started that about a year ago.
I love how much tinkering you've done to your business in the past few years. It really shows your interest in working on the business versus just in the business. Is this because you're working with a coach, or is this just kind of how your mind works? You seem to be, playing with different levers all over the place as you define your perfect firm.
Yeah, this is it's the way I'm wired, but in particular, the way, if you're a marketer, then what you do is you try a bunch of stuff, you test, you see some stuff works, you do that, you see some stuff doesn't work, and you stop doing that. And so this business to me is, it's a great way to do a bunch of different testing, because and I think it's helpful for people to realize you're not going to start out with you're not going to start out with everything perfect. So you start out with something, whatever you think is reasonable. Some things will work, some things won't. You can adjust, and it's an evolution. I think the way to think about the business is it's very much an evolution, and you want to test a bunch of different stuff. You see what works, can keep doing that. Some stuff is not going to work, and you can stop doing that. So that's how I've approached the business. I'm constantly testing, trying to make things better.
Love it. Given that you're a solo shop right now, what's your typical day and week look like?
So the way I currently do it, and I started this, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, which is I do time blocking. So my Monday is typically doing client prep work. So prepping for meetings, doing meeting summaries. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is client meetings. So really focused on having client meetings there. Friday is my work on the business day. So I really focus on, hey, what do I need to focus on for the business? And then prospect meetings, I've tinkered with that and currently do those mostly Monday through Thursday. Just started doing that. Yeah. So that's what it looks like.
What kind of things were you looking for in terms of a lifestyle improvement when you decided to go out on your own from being an employee? Were you expecting more time with the family? Was there something drawing you towards being an entrepreneur for other reasons than just kind of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. A few things. One is flexibility. I've never had this kind of flexibility in my life, and I love it. And as an example, our younger son, this is mostly pre-COVID, but he's a runner. And so he had cross-country meets every Wednesday at 3, and then track season, he'd have his track meets on Wednesdays at 3. And so if you get a normal job, I wasn't making those, but since I've had my business, I've been to all of his track meets and all his running events because I can. And so having the flexibility for me has been awesome. I love that. So that was critical for me. Also really working with the clients I want to work with. So the clients, the firm I was at before, the focus was mostly corporate executives. So they tended to be older, tended to be corporate executives. And so that's not who they're great clients, love working with them, but it wasn't, I didn't feel any particular connection to them. So working, but for me, kind of the reason I'm so passionate about this is because these are the people I want to help. These are the people that need the help, and I want to help them. And so I can work with them. And then I think I have just a tremendous sense of ownership that I don't think I really had before. You own parts of a business, or you have clients, but when you own the business, and you make all the decisions that affect the business, I think that is, to me, it's been personally just more satisfying, really career-wise, than anything else I've ever done. And then the other thing is you have more control. I feel like you have more control of your destiny than you do if you're working, for somebody else. And you don't have complete control, but you have more control. And so all of those are reasons that I wanted to go out on my own.
Yeah. Maybe it's just kind of your cadence and how you discuss all this, but I'm just not sensing a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm not sensing a lot of nerves around what you're doing. Granted, you've made it over the hump of whether you're going to make this work or not. But can you speak at all to the listeners that might be a little bit more timid around going out and doing what you just did? You've just listed all the wonderful benefits that can come from it, but the realities is that sometimes you might wake up on a Monday morning and think you're not built for this. Did you ever have that kind of experience?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I did.
No,
especially early on. But I think there are a couple of ways to think about that. One is, I think if you get some real life experience, as in you work with some clients, you do good work, they're happy, that then I think should give you a ton of confidence. I know I can do it. I'm doing it in this firm today. If I move outside this firm, it's going to be the same thing. So I think having direct experience with the things you're going to be doing, I think if you come in without that, it may be tougher, but you'll get that once you start working with clients. And then once you start to work with clients, I think you'll just see you're adding a ton of value for these guys, right? The things that you may not think are that valuable are hugely valuable to the clients. And so once you start to work with clients and you see the value you provide, I think that then just makes it it can give you more confidence, makes it even easier for you. And then for me as a career changer, I've been around a while, right? So I worked at a bunch of places prior to doing financial planning, and I worked with clients directly. And so I think all of that life experience helps you realize you know what you're doing, even if you may not realize it. You do know what you're doing.
Yeah, really, really good advice. Tom, you've mentioned that the niche has been a great generator of additional clients for you, but what has your story been with regards to marketing? How do you market yourself?
Sure. So the marketing, which is a love of mine anyway, when I started out early on, which is probably not the case for most people, what was working for me marketing wise was my personal network. So my natural market, right? So I worked in Silicon Valley. I just went out and talked to a ton of people and I said, hey, here's what I'm doing. That was helpful. I also talked to, as you guys have talked about before, I went out and talked to some local RIAs. When I started, I didn't have a minimum. I talked to those who had a minimum. And there was a little bit there. And then I got listed on all the XY, NAPFA, And then also early on for me, and especially here in the Bay Area for that target, Yelp.
Interesting.
I was on Yelp, as in I had clients put in some reviews. And so those things were the primary sources initially. And then as I started to get into the focusing in on the niche, I started to do things like, one thing is I did brown bags, or so lunch and learns. I'd go into local tech companies that had recent IPOs, et cetera. And because I talked to the HR people there, and they said, yeah, we have a ton of questions around equity, but nobody to educate these guys. So I went in and just give pure education. Here's what the equity is. Here's how it works, et cetera. And so that was, as I got into the niche, that was another way it was helpful. And then again, as I started to get client referrals became more important. And then once the pandemic hit, kind of some of those things I couldn't do in-person brown bags, right? I started to see what was working digitally, and the things that were working, one of those was Yelp was becoming more and more important for me. And so what I started to do then was I started to test because the way Yelp was working, I had reviews. I would show up, you search on financial planner, I show up in the listings, right? But you can also do Yelp advertising. So I started to test Yelp ads to see if I could get anything out of that. And actually that has been important for me in that it does give you more visibility. You show up at the top of the listings because Yelp wants people to click on the ads. And so that gave me that became even more important. Client referrals became important, even more important, just Google, local search, et cetera. And so when I look at it today, last year or so, probably about 40% were coming through Yelp, about 30% from client referrals, and then probably 10% or so each from Google, Natural Market, NAPFA, so the other sources. And if you think about something really interesting, if you think about Yelp and the other services, Yelp in particular for the Bay Area, and I know you've had some other planners on that it's worked for from the Bay Area, and for my target market, which is tech people, right? One of the and Gen X, Gen Y, in a lot of cases, the first thing people do, I talk to every prospect. I say, "How'd you find me?" They go, "I just went to Yelp and I typed in financial planner." Really? That's how they find people, and so
cool.
I think depending on your market, that may or may not work. And so I'm guessing probably the more urban, it may work better, more tech savvy, it may work better. And then it's going to depend on who your market is. But if anyone out there has any, I've been testing this for a while. If anybody has any other knowledge, they can reach out to me. I'd love to talk to them about it, because I'm trying to always figure that out.
So cool, Tom. I don't hear Yelp all that often. And that's incredible that's your go-to.
Yeah. In the Bay Area, it has been very successful. So, Sean Tidlaska, I talked to him a bunch. It's worked for him. Mm-hmm. People in the city. It's and the other thing to think about is think about the marketing funnel where people are. If they're coming to Yelp, they are at the bottom of the funnel. They're ready to find somebody to work with. So they're putting in financial planner. Once they find you, it's a matter of, okay, are you going to work with me or somebody else? You're already all the way at the bottom of the funnel. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And the other thing I should point out is that there's a lot of volume from Yelp, but there's a wide range in the quality. So there's not a way to qualify people. So there's, somebody can come in through Yelp and they can say, "Hey, can you help me understand how to pay off my credit card debt?" And then somebody would come in and they can say, I have a few million in equity, help me figure this out. So there's a wide range in quality, which means that you have to kind of manage that.
Yeah. You brought up other advisors showing up in that search result, obviously. And there are more and more folks focusing on this niche. And I think anytime we see an increase in focus on a niche, that's a straight up testament to the need for that support. How do you kind of reconcile the fact that you may have other advisors competing for the same clients as you?
Well, it's as I've said, there's a ton of need for help. So at this point, I know there is way more demand. People need the help than there are advisors. So I think the more advisors, the better in this niche. And you talk to anybody, any other planner in XY who's working on the niche, in this particular niche, they'll say to you, when you talk to prospects, my prospects say pretty regularly, hey, it was really hard to find somebody who can help me with this kind of stuff. Because again, it's not everybody who's doing it.
Yeah, great answer. I'm interested, Tom, we started the conversation off around kind of being concerned about leaving your big job to start your own firm and that income gap. Have you been able to make up that income doing what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I don't know if we talked about the numbers. So the firm, the business today looks like this. It's got 48. I serve 48 households on an ongoing basis. Again, financial planning, and most of those doing investment management. So those clients, and as I talked to you about the business, I don't know if I wrap this up, but the way it's evolved is almost all the revenue now, bulk of the revenue is coming through AUM. So I have about $80 million in AUM. And so my current run rate for the revenue, assuming if the market stays where it is, for the year will be about $575,000.
Congratulations, Tom. That's a wonderful trajectory. And I would credit some of your tinkering of your price points to helping you get there.
Yeah. And the most important thing I think has been, this niche is I'm a great fit for this niche, and there is just a ton of need for help for the niche. And as I've said before, tech, Silicon Valley there is just so much wealth here that it's just unbelievable. So people need to help to figure out what to do with it.
Totally. I so appreciate, Tom, your abundance mentality around this, that there just couldn't be enough advisors to help serve the need, let alone all the other niches that our advisors are serving. I guess just to round out this interview, it's been so full of great tips and advice, but if you could kind of sum up something along the lines of what do you wish you had known before you started your firm that you know now that you might want some of our listeners to know about?
Well, let's see. So a few things. One is, I think if you can, and it makes sense, I would start with the niche because it just makes everything easier. Everything just becomes more focused. So if you can do that, I would do that. It's going to make your life easier. Also, as I said before, I would think about the business as just you're doing an experiment, right? You start with something. You're gonna change. It's gonna evolve. Test, see what works. Do more of that. If it doesn't work, do less of that. Right. And then another thing I'd say is that the more runway you give yourself, the better. Because in my mind, this will work. Starting your own firm will work eventually. You just have to give yourself enough time. It's just a matter of time. If you give yourself more runway, you have a better chance of making it work, because it's really a matter of time before you get your clients, you get your business figured out. And if you can just give yourself enough time to do that, then you can be in a great place.
Really good advice, Tom, all around. Thank you so much for being on XYPN Radio, for sharing your story, your expertise, some really, really great nuggets of wisdom. And congratulations, most importantly, on building this and following your heart's desire to do what you wanted to do. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you, Maddie. It's been great talking to you, and appreciate all the stuff that XYPN does to really, for me, to help build this firm, make it possible.
Absolutely. An event made just for fee-only advisors? Yep, you heard that right. It's XYPN Live. And with over 45 content sessions, 3 keynotes, a one-of-a-kind exhibit hall day, and networking opportunities galore, it's the game-changing event you've been looking for. Join us in November, in person or virtually, and leave with knowledge, new connections, and a whole lot of inspiration to accelerate your progress and smash your goals, no matter where you are in your advisor journey. Visit xypnlive.com for full details and to grab your pass. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes, and finally, to find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thank you so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You are not alone and you are not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm, and that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.